Hey guys, LA here. In this video tutorial I'm going to show you guys how to set up a lab. Now the lab that we're going to set up is going to consist of two virtual hosts as well as a virtual router. The router that we're going to use is going to be Pfsense. Pfsense is an open source router. The virtual platform that we're going to be using is VirtualBox. So in order to get started with this tutorial, you'll need to have VirtualBox as well as Pfsense and a couple of hosts, ISOs. What I'm going to be using in this video tutorial is going to be Windows 10 as well as Windows Server 2012. But if you want to use Linux or any other distro or operating system, go ahead. But just keep in mind for this tutorial I'm going to be using Windows. Now you'll also want to have a host system that's capable of running multiple VMs. So I'm running a system here that has installed memory of 20 gigs. It has 20 gigs of RAM. Now you'll want to have an adequate amount of RAM in order to run multiple VMs simultaneously. 16 gigs will be just enough to run maybe 2 VMs depending on its depending on the capacity. If you have 8 gigs of memory, you might get away with running one virtual machine, but the more the better. If you have 32 gigs, you'll do more than fine. You'll have more than enough. 20 gigs, I feel like is meeting the bare minimum, but you know, that's what I have here, and it seems to be working well enough for me. But in any case, you'll want to have memory. So again, you'll want to download VirtualBox because that's what we're going to be using. You'll also, with VirtualBox, want to download the VirtualBox extension pack. It'll allow you to have USB support, disk encryption, and a couple other things that's just nice to have. Windows 10, you can get that. You can get the ISO from the media creation kit. You can type in Windows 10 ISO in Google, and the first link that'll pop up will take you to the this link here at Microsoft, where you can download the media creation tool, and it'll walk you through the process of creating an ISO. You'll also want to get Server 2012, and you can simply type Windows Server 2012 in Google and find the download link for Windows Server 2012. You want to select ISO. Additionally, you'll want to download Pfsense. Download the newest version, 2.43. You'll want to get the 64-bit AMD architecture and select ISO and choose what mirror is appropriate for your location and download. Now the download is compressed in a GZ file. I used an application called 7-Zip. 7-Zip is a free compression and uncompression software. So I use 7-Zip to uncompress the GZ file. Now I have all these applications here. I have the Pfsense ISO, the Windows Server ISO, as well as the Windows 10 ISO, and VirtualBox installed onto my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and get VirtualBox up here and running. And we're going to start off by creating a virtual router using Pfsense. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on New, and in the name we're going to type in Pfsense. For type, we're going to choose Linux. And for version, we're just going to scroll to the bottom and choose Other 64-bit, and we're going to click on Next. For the recommended memory size, I'm just going to give it 1 gig, which is 1024 megabytes. We're going to click on Next, and for the hard disk type, we're going to click Create. We're going to choose a VDI setup, dynamically allocated, and for the hard disk size, we're going to leave this at 8 gigs. Alright, so now that we have the VM created, we're going to right click on Pfsense and click on Settings. Some of the things that I typically check when I create a VM is the system and the processor. For this case, we don't need a lot of processing power for a virtual router, so I'm just going to choose one CPU. Another thing I do is I click on the storage, and since I'm using a solid state drive, I'm going to go ahead and click on the solid state drive feature. Now we're going to load the ISO into this virtual machine by clicking on this empty CD, and we're going to click on this little CD icon here, and we're going to click on choose virtual optical disk file. Now since my Pfsense ISO is located on my desktop here, I'm just going to go ahead and navigate to it and double click on the Pfsense ISO, and that's going to load the ISO in the CD drive. Now another thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on the network tab, and I'm going to add an additional network adapter. Now this network adapter is going to be a internal network adapter, which is what my virtual host will connect to. And adapter 1 I'm going to leave as NAT. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And we're going to power up the virtual machine. So on the initial boot, you don't have to type anything. It'll go through the installation process automatically. Alright, so we're in the installer. Go ahead and click on A or hit enter for accept. And we're going to install by clicking OK. We're going to continue with the default key map. We're going to select auto, and we're going to let the installation proceed. Alright, so now that the installation is complete, we're going to go ahead and reboot, and during the reboot process we're going to unmount the CD drive so that it does not resume the installation process. It will start the boot process from memory. So we're going to just go ahead and click on reboot, and we're going to go to device, optical drives, and remove disk from drive and force an unmount. We're going to let the auto boot go through, and this is going to boot directly from the virtual drive. Alright, so as you can see here, Pfsense has completed the installation process. Now it automatically configured the WAN Ethernet device with the 10.0.2.15/24, and it also configured a LAN interface, EM1 with 192.168.1.1/24. Now we can modify those interfaces by pressing 1, and that will allow us to assign the interfaces, and we can press 2, and that'll let us go through the process of assigning IP addresses to those interfaces. However, since it automatically configured these interface settings for me, I'm going to leave it as is, and we're going to move on. But at this point, the virtual router is set up and complete. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go back to our Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager, and we're going to start the setup for Windows 10. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to go ahead and click on New, and for this we're going to name it Windows 10. Now VirtualBox automatically filled in a type and a version for me, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. For the memory size, it's recommended that you have at least 4 gigs, so I'm going to set this to 4. I'm going to create a hard disk now using a VDI setup that's dynamically allocated, and we can modify the hard disk size. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to 25. However, you can set this to the appropriate amount that you need. However, I think you would want to have at least 20 gigs of disk space in order to run Windows 10. Don't quote me on that, but I'm just gonna stick around the bare minimum. So with 25 gigs, I think we'll have enough space there. I'm gonna click on create. And again, we're gonna right click on the virtual box for Windows 10 and go to settings. I'm gonna go to system and processor and give this virtual machine 2 CPUs to run off of. I'm going to go to storage and I'm going to click on the VDI for Windows 10 and I'm going to change this to solid state since I'm running a solid state. Since I have this running on a solid state drive, I'm going to click on the CD drive as well and go to where my Windows 10 ISO is located, which is on my desktop, and I'm going to load that up. Now I'm also going to go to network and I'm going to change my network adapter to the internal network adapter so that it matches the LAN interface of my Pfsense router. I'm going to click on OK and we're going to click on start. Alright, so in the Windows 10 installation setup, we're just going to go ahead and click on next and we're going to click on install now. Now since we don't have a product key, I'm just going to go ahead and click on I don't have a product key. And I'm going to choose Windows 10 Pro and we're going to click next. I'm going to click the license terms, click on next. I'm going to click on custom install and we're just going to click on next here. Alright guys, so I went ahead and went through the setup for Windows 10 and we've completed that setup. What I want to do is verify the network connectivity and verify that it's connected to our LAN interface here. Our LAN interface is set to 192.168.1.1. So I want to make sure that my Windows 10 box is set to that address, that the default gateway is set to that address. So I'm going to right click on the start menu and go to PowerShell. And I'm going to do an ipconfig/all. And as we can see here, the default gateway, it is indeed set to 192.168.1.1, and it was able to get a IP address off of that range. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up Internet Explorer real quick just to go to that IP address. Going to that IP address, the default gateway for the LAN interface is going to connect us to the GUI interface for the Pfsense router. And we can click on details and go to the web page, and I can see that we're connected. Alright, so I'm not going to go through the I'm not going to connect to the Pfsense GUI router just yet. The next step that I want to do is I actually want to set up the Windows Server 2012. Alright, so back in VirtualBox, I want to go ahead and click on New. And for the name, we're going to type in Windows Server 2012. And we can see that the version automatically completed as well as the type. So I'm going to click on Next. And we're going to set this to a recommended of 4 gigs. We're going to click on Next. And we're going to click on Next to create a hard disk now. We're going to choose the VDI setup. Of click next, and dynamically allocate it. I'm going to change the hard disk size to 25, and I'm going to click on create. Alright, so I'm going to right click on the virtual machine for server 2012 and go to settings. I'm going to go to system, processor, and move this to 2 cores. I'm going to go to storage, and again, since I have a SSD, solid state drive, I'm going to mark this so that the solid state drive settings are enabled. I'm also going to go to the empty CD drive here and click on choose virtual optical disk, and I'm going to navigate to where my server 2012 ISO is located, which is my desktop. And I'm going to go to network, and I'm going to change the attached network adapter to the internal network adapter so that it connects to the local area network interface. I'm going to click on OK. And I'm going to start. Alright, in the Windows setup for Server 2012, I'm just going to leave the language set to English and click on Next and Install. Alright, so at this screen we're going to choose the server with the GUI, and we're going to click on Next. We're going to accept the terms and click Next. Custom install, and we're going to click on Next. Alright, so as you can see here, we successfully completed the installation of Windows Server 2012. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the server manager. We're going to check to see if we are connected. It does seem like we do have some internet connectivity. I'm going to pull up the PowerShell, and I'm going to do an ipconfig all. And again, I see that the default gateway is set to the internal LAN, or excuse me, is set to the interface, the LAN interface for Pfsense, and it pulled a IP address from the pool of 1.100. Alright, so we successfully created a lab in which we have 2 hosts running, a server and a client, a Windows 10 client, as well as a router. I'm going to start the Windows 10 client real quick. We're going to open up this VM. Alright, so I have the Windows 10 virtual host up and running. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Alright, so I'm going to do an IP config to get my IP address, which is 1.100. So I'm going to ping 192.168.1.101 because that is the server 2012 host. So I'm going to hit enter. And we're seeing that it's timing out. Alright, so the reason why we got a request timeout is more than likely because the server is not set to network discovery. We can change that setting by going into the network adapter properties. You can do that by right clicking on the network icon and clicking on network and sharing center. And we're going to go to change advanced sharing settings. And we're going to turn on the network discovery, as well as turn on file and printer sharing. And we're going to save those changes. and we're going to try to ping again. And now, as you can see here, we're able to get a echo reply response from the 1.101, the server. And let's try to ping the Windows 10 host from our server. And the same thing is applying here. What I'm going to do is go to the Windows 10 host and go to the adapter options, the adapter settings. Actually, here I'm going to go to sharing options, and I'm going to go turn on network discovery as well as file and printer sharing. And if we try that again, we can see that we're getting replies back from our Windows 10 host. At this point, we've completed the lab. We have two virtual hosts here. One is a server, one is a Windows 10 host, and it's being the medium that is passing through, the gateway that is passing through is Pfsense router. Alright, so at this point I'm going to go ahead and complete the setup for our Pfsense router. So the 192.168.1.1 again is the LAN interface address. Now the default login for Pfsense router is admin for the username, and password is Pfsense, all lowercase. So throughout this process, I'm going to go ahead and choose next. For my primary DNS server, I'm going to choose a public DNS server, which is 9.9.9.9, and the secondary server is going to be 8.8.8.8. These two are public DNS servers. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next, and I'm going to click on next. We're going to choose next again, and next, and reload. So this is going to complete the Pfsense setup. I'm going to go ahead and click on the continue. Click here to continue the Pfsense web configuration. I'm going to try to connect again. Seemed like we got dropped off there, but essentially we're back online to the Pfsense router. Now I'm not going to go through and explain each and every interface here or setup here or configuration option that is in Pfsense, because there is a massive amount of configuration options that you can do in Pfsense. However, it is set up for basic firewall and gateway capabilities. And again, it's set up for our lab. So that should do it for the lab. Again, we have two virtual hosts here, a server and Windows 10, and we have our Pfsense gateway router. Alright, so that'll complete the tutorial. If you guys have any questions, I'm sure you're going to have plenty of questions out there, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section, and thanks for watching my video.